I'm Bobby Baker, I'm an artist, and this is Kitchen Show. I realised that I wanted to make work about my life, myself, and I was quite worried about that because I hadn't seen that sort of work around. But I realised that was the only thing I could do. It was the way I was as a person, and that essentially I was making the work for myself to try and resolve really kind of big questions, complex questions, things I felt ambiguous about, because I think that's what art is so brilliant at doing. And I hoped that people would be interested, but essentially it had, in order to have integrity, it had to be about what was concerning me at that stage of my life. And I was 23, and clearly, although I hadn't encountered the word feminist, I was indignant about how women's sort of lot in society. So I made work about things that I saw at the time. When I made Kitchen Show, I had small children, and I was very much stuck doing a lot. Well, I wouldn't say stuck. I was sort of in charge domestically, and I was working as an artist, and I was doing a lot of supporting my mother and my husband and trying to earn money. So that was what that show was about. Well, it's about something much bigger, really. Kitchen Show is about my ongoing sort of astonishment but acceptance of the fact that domestic labour, that this sort of work is not valued, has no status. And yet I see it as the most fundamentally important part of any society. You know, the poorest people do it. It's very class-based. And so that show was about that sense of outrage, really. And yet a sense of joy at what I was doing. So when I talk about ambiguity and ambivalence, that it is that I love a lot about. I love daily life, and I love all the details and all the minutiae and all the relationships and all the interconnectedness of things, and how, you know, that notion of the world in a grain of sand. I just see that sort of tiny detail as you know, you can look at it and then you can see the whole world in it. So that show was about that sort of thinking going on while you're doing everyday things.
One of the most soothing things that I do in my kitchen is to rinse and prepare vegetables under running water. I know I shouldn't really leave the water running, especially when there's a bit of a drought on, but it's one of my luxuries, really, just to let the water run away, because I just love the feel of the water running over my hands and wrists. It's so calming and cooling.
I'm not a person who can create fiction. I can come up with kind of unusual images and ideas. That's the way my mind thinks. But I love drama and fiction, and I love all sorts of work. But the way I make work is based on my own experience. And so to a degree, it could be seen as autobiographical, but it's not. It's just using my experience in a kind of removed way to make a kind of construct a piece of work or an image or an idea about something that I know a lot about because I'm living it. And I'm really good at peeling carrots. And I just don't know, I find things like saying I'm good at peeling carrots, which I am, and enjoying it kind of a sort of gives you a notion of, I want to tell the whole world about this because this is really important. This is a nub of what I'm doing every day, and there are other women. So my very first idea, I wanted that to be beamed globally. And at that time in the early 1990s, it would have been outside broadcast. I'd not seen it happening, but I knew that, you know, film crews arrived and they would be sort of beamed in, and it would be, I don't know how they would send it out globally, but that was the first idea, that they would come. And I found it hysterically, well, just like delightful at the thought of the pomposity of this man and to being surrounded by a camera crew, and yeah, that's what I'm doing. So it was that concept. What I realised when I decided to open my kitchen to the public was I didn't want it to it couldn't just be that. It had to be a way of communicating information to people. So I came up with the idea of opening my kitchen to the public, and I was part of this festival, London International Festival Theatre, who commissioned it, and was that it would be also and initially a film and a book. And so before it was very complicated to come up with the idea, carry on family life, and then make this film and the book. It's a beautiful book made with Lewis Nicholson, and the film is made with Carole Lamond, who's a filmmaker. And so we made the film before I'd even done a live performance. But it was very much on this notion of 12 one dozen actions and the finale. And I think she did an astonishing job. So it was very exciting, because I've not made work like that before. And the idea was that this film would be put on a VHS tape, put in a jiffy bag, and then I would send it off all over the world. So I wasn't beaming it out, but people could see the work, and I could also fit, the book was made to fit in the envelope to the jiffy bag, so you get 2 for 1. And funny enough, the book sold out. I've still got a few copies as we toured, but the film is the work now, which I feel is very fitting if you think of how a conceptual idea then can communicate at different times.
When I welcome people into my kitchen, I always offer them hot drinks straight away. I get very anxious if I haven't. It's sort of the minutes tick by, and it makes me really worried, because what's also really exasperating is when you say, what would you like? And they say, well, I'll have what you're having.
So then I decided it would be very interesting to open my kitchen to the public. And then I just sort of, out of that idea of constructing 1 dozen actions, to kind of formally organise it and then mark them one by one and have a sort of finale. So when anybody ever comes to my house, I always offer them a hot drink. But I made it about how I stir the sugar in, and sort of focused on that little tragic gesture of stirring the sugar. In the ordering of them, there's very often an idea of how people react to it. So there's a sort of logic to it. So I wanted people to have a cup of tea, to arrive, and there's all that faff of handing them out. And I gave them a biscuit, Nice biscuit, which has nice printed on it. So that was a sort of bit of an icebreaker, I suppose. And then I carried on with other actions later. And so I don't think in the performance, you don't see in the film everything that happened in all that malarkey of the live event, but you see the actions themselves summarised and I think captured. The one that really grabbed people was the throwing the pear up against a distant wall in moments of intense rage, which is quite an important thing to point out when you're so frustrated and so oppressed, really, with a sense of indignation that there is no value, no status, no kind of celebration of what you're doing. And so yeah, that kind of feeling of emotion. I mean, I never really threw a ripe pear against a distant wall in moment of extreme rage. I mean, I've done lots of other things, but not that. But I just thought it was a wonderful image of a sort of piece of fruit that's slightly gone off, and the splat, and the attention to detail that is absolutely important. If you're, you know that if you leave it there too long, it's going to get absolute nightmare to get it off the wall, because you've experienced that because some child has left a pear, and there's something about pear skin that it once stuck on, you can't get it off. So that bit sort of illustrates the nub of the idea of somebody being trapped and frustrated and indignant that what they were doing was invisible. Well, it's like a lot of my work, people react in a whole variety of ways. I think people get very emotional about it. There is a sort of almost taboo about humour, and yet I really want to connect with people and to get them to think about what I'm doing without finding it too odd, but to just relate to it. And the intellectual side, the sort of to come later, which is what quite often people have said. I was totally absorbed with it, and then I not stopped thinking about it ever since. It was so odd what you were doing. And I think that's a success, you know, so that you're sort of in it at the moment. And so people's response is quite emotional. It might be also finding it very funny. And people are sometimes indignant, you know, made me laugh, you made me cry. And you think, well, that's okay. You know, did I make you think? And that's it. So you can't tell and you can't say, but I think generally it was totally kind of caught up with it. But yeah, people get emotional and buzz, you know. I know it's a success when they're standing on the pavement afterwards, or when I've done shows where people are just in huddles talking about their lives, because I think that's one of the biggest things I keep coming back to. I'm using myself as an example, but I don't want them to think about me. I want them to think about themselves and their lives. So how do they then think about that work? Who's doing that work for them, or are they doing it themselves? So I was a bit shocked when I started touring during a Mother's Experience, because I was, you know, my late 30s, sort of entering my prime, and these young guys would come up and say, you make me think of my mother. And I think, oh. Or my grandmother. I think, oh. But actually then I thought, no, that's great, because I really want to communicate with men and women, and so if that makes you think about that, that's fine. I'm 73. It's been a long time. I've been around a long time making work. And so, yeah, I'm really pleased to be in it, finally, because I can see the importance of the collection, because it means more people can get access to your work, or they can borrow it or show it. I mean, obviously there's a status to that, but it's not so much that, it's the fact that it's available, and increasingly it's sort of visible via the website. And it matters, you know, as an artist, it matters to have your work in collections and available for people, rather than just to be found through you. So I'm absolutely thrilled about that, because I do think this is a film that can be shown, and we have shown it, but people didn't know it was available. So yeah, I'm delighted about that.